This is my Murray 2 horsepower 10-inch cultivator. I've owned this since new. I believe it was back in 2000 when I purchased it. This particular model is powered by a Tecumseh TC2 engine, and more specifically its model number is TC300. This is not a how-to video. What I am going to do is show you a couple of things that I found out about this tiller, and a couple of things that were not available on the internet when I did my research to address an issue that I had with this tiller. By the way, it's been a great tiller. I've owned it for almost 20 years, and probably over 20 years, and never had any problems with it until recently. And the issue that I had actually was this right here, the fuel line and that little white fuel filter, or fuel fitting, I believe they call it. And you could see right there it was cracked, and I had this thing in hibernation, this tiller, for a few years. When I took it out, filled it up with fuel, fully expected it to start, which it did sputter, but I had that leak, and after I took it apart, that was the issue. So that's actually what I am going to fix today. The tools that I will be using are a slotted screwdriver, a 1/4-inch drive socket with a 1 9mm socket on the end of that extension, a pair of pliers, and then I'm going to put a new spark plug in, and that has a 0.030 gap, 30 thousandths. So I had the feeler gauge there, and those are the parts that I actually purchased. The fuel fitting is part number 640363, and it was $1.20 from Jack's small engine. And then I also am going to be replacing the O fitting, and that's part number 570649, and that was $1.30. And that's the spark plug, relatively inexpensive, $2, RCJY, and once again it's 30 thousandths gap, and that's the new fuel line. I opted for black rubber fuel as opposed to this hard plastic, because this is very, very rigid and not at all flexible anymore, and I'd much rather put that on. So what did I do with this tiller? Well, I actually took it apart already, and I'm going to show you how simple this thing is to work on. So to get to where I needed to be, I had to take the fuel tank off, and that's real easy. 3 nuts. The first nut is right there, and that's a 9mm nut. And then I took the air cleaner out, which is that right there. Comes out with 2 screws, 2 slotted screws right there. And then the fuel filter, or pardon me, the air filter is there, and this is something they call a flock screen that goes right inside there, comes right out. And after you get that removed, this comes right off. The fuel tank comes right off. Just lift it up, and then over that nut right there. Now the last thing you'd have to do is, of course, disconnect the fuel line, which is right there, and it's this thing right there. Disconnect that, and it has a little clamp, and that goes to the carburetor, which is right there, and that is where this plastic fitting goes, and that goes right on there. and that's where mine was broken. So that's what I'm going to replace today. Relatively simple, very inexpensive repair, less than 10 bucks. But a couple things I wanted to show you, and I found them very interesting. So the governor spring, which is right there, is anchored with the round end of it going right on that pin right there. It's a stationary pin, it doesn't move. And then the other half going onto a piece of plastic that goes inside of the shroud, and it's a sail. And I'm not going to take the carburetor off, but you can see that right there. And I want to bring that to everyone's attention because on this sail right there are actually two holes. One in the front, how mine is anchored, and then one a little further back. And just remember the orientation of yours. Mine, I took a look at it, it's the one right there, and there's one a little further back. And I checked the manual, as a matter of fact, online, and they spray painted these springs, and mine was actually black, and that's the designation for the location of the J hook on that governor spring being right there. That's one thing I wanted to show you. The next thing relates to something called an insulated spacer, and it's that thing at the bottom right there. It's a separate piece from the carburetor. It's this thing right here. It's a hard piece of plastic. And first of all, I wanted to mention there is a gasket that is underneath that, and a gasket that is on top of that as well. So there's two gaskets here. I noticed there was some confusion on the internet whether or not there were two gaskets. There are. On mine anyways, there were two. And on the bottom of this insulated spacer, there is a U channel that's part of this thing. It's burrowed right into the side of that, and that's called a vacuum channel. I know there was a lot of confusion on the internet as to whether or not that channel was facing the carburetor or facing the engine, and I can tell you mine was facing the engine. And to get that off, by the way, these two lugs are right there, and they simply come off with a 1/4 inch socket. So unscrew those, and the whole carburetor, that insulated spacer, everything comes off. It's a real easy carburetor to work on. And the last thing I want to show you is something that is real important, and it relates to, there's a baffle right here, a fuel baffle. I took mine apart, and there is a port right there. This, by the way, this is where the needle valve and everything resides. It's in there. I cleaned mine up, but there's a port right there, and you can see it. I'll point it out. This port right there in the carburetor. That port is accessible through the top of this, and I strongly suggest anyone interested in cleaning it out to not mess with that port, that passage going through here, because people have a tendency to stick with small wires through there thinking they're cleaning it out, and right inside of that port right there, there is a check valve. It's a membrane, a very small circular membrane, and it moves up and down. And if you go in there and you start poking or cleaning it as you think you're doing, you're actually damaging that membrane, or blowing it out with a burst of air or carb cleaner, whatever the case may be. You don't mess with that port right there. You leave it alone. That's one thing I want to bring to everyone's attention. So with that being said, that's all I wanted to show you. I'm going to go ahead and fix my little Murray cultivator, which I've grown quite fond of. It's a great little cultivator, and hope to get many more years out of it.